So my name is Kyle Reismore. I just turned 45 in February. I live in Miami, Florida, and that is my hobby and my interest. Everything in the city keeps you busy all the time. So I'm married 6 years, and my husband and I are actually currently in the middle of an adoption. So that's very exciting. We're finalizing soon, and couldn't be more happy that the cancer hasn't postponed the adoption. So that's been great. So I knew something was wrong. Literally, two chain of events were happening. My husband and I went to Europe for a month. And before we went to Europe, he had some major gastro issues to the point where we actually, we went down the Dr. Google rabbit hole, and we really were accepting the fact that he may have colon cancer before we were able to get him in for a colonoscopy. So all of his symptoms, the cramping, the pain, the aches, the uncontrollable restroom breaks, the not being able to sleep because of the pain, and we were just not being able to get answers. He ended up getting an endoscopy and a colonoscopy, and he turned out perfect, thank goodness. No issues, just happened to be a flare-up. So when we got back, so then we went to Europe, spent a beautiful month in Europe with friends, and traveled all around to multiple countries. And when we came back, I was very open and honest with him. I was like, look, while we were gone, I had major constipation and some blood started to show up into my stool. And it's getting to the point now where the blood is becoming more than the stool, and it's making me very nervous. And of course, I went on Google, and they said it's hemorrhoids. I called my doctor. My doctor prescribed me an over-the-counter laxative and hemorrhoid cream. And she just said that's going to be, it's probably just that, no big deal. And then my husband had to go back for a follow-up on his colonoscopy, just his last follow-up with the doctor to make sure his stomach was doing okay and things like that. And while he was there, I was like, hey, listen, see if they can get me in, squeeze me in. And this was right before Christmas. And he called me back and he was like, believe it or not, they have a cancellation. Can you come? I'm a retail manager, so that's a very, very busy time. I took the day off. I went and got the colonoscopy. I forgot to mention, I have done every year since I turned 40. So I'm now 45. So for 4 years, I did the at-home screening because I did speak to my medical team, my general practice doctor, and let her know that my grandmother did pass from colon cancer. So she was like, let's be proactive and we'll do the screenings. Well, obviously the screenings didn't catch it. How I did the at-home test is that my doctor prescribed, and she brought in an envelope, and it was a kit, right? And it had swabs in it. And inside the swabs, it had instructions on how to retrieve a sample. And then you retrieve a sample and you put the sample on, kind of like the COVID test. You would stick the entire thing in, you'd break the swab, you'd break the top off, and then you just put it back, and it was in a hazard envelope, and then you put it in the mail, and then they give the results back to the doctor. And I did that for 4 years before I had my colonoscopy. Everything was fine. All my levels were fine. After the colonoscopy was over, I was freezing cold, and the doctor that did the colonoscopy was like, is there any way that you can join me in this room? And I texted my husband really quickly, and I was like, when you came out of your anesthetics, did they ask you to quickly join them in a room? He said no, and I immediately knew. I immediately knew it was going to happen. His bedside manners were okay. He leaned up against the wall, and he was like, while during your colonoscopy, we found a mass in your sigmoid colon. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, colon cancer. And I was like, okay. And I walked out. I was, again, like shivering cold because I didn't wear enough clothes because it was hot outside, believe it or not. It was freezing cold in the facility. And I went out and I told my husband, I was like, they found something. And they gave me a packet and I could see the image of it. And we left and he was asking me, how do you feel? And I was like, we're going to get through this. Like, it's fine. So we came home that night and I got very proactive. I started reaching out to friends of mine who happened to be in the medical industry, and asking for advice from them, even though that's not their focus. But, doctors know doctors, right? Luckily enough, a friend of ours who's a doctor, he was able to get me in touch with another doctor. And again, this is all during the holiday. So he said, let me see the imaging. And I sent a picture of that. He said, when I get back from my family holiday vacation, you'll be my first patient. So luckily I got in there. And I saw that doctor immediately, and then he ran the tests, and yes, it was colon cancer. This doctor said he doesn't trust anybody's colonoscopies except for his own. So I had an additional one. He was like, I'm the surgeon. I'm the one that would be able to remove it. So I want to be able to see it for myself, and I'm going to do it for you. And I was like, oh, wow, the surgeon's actually doing the colonoscopy. And so he went in, he saw the same, and he felt as though that he needed a second opinion, with some more scans and some tests. So I did go see an oncologist at that point, and I saw I started getting scans. I got my CT scan. And unfortunately, when they did the CT scan, it lit up in my liver. So then at that point, we had to stop what we had started, and immediately go into focus on what's going on with my liver. I hadn't really put my hands around it, when the surgeon called me and said, Kyle, it's in your liver. It's out of my wheelhouse now. My heart sank into my chest, but I was like, okay, I've got to come out and deliver this news to my husband and my family. And I was in our guest bedroom when I took the call. The news wasn't taken by my family very well. And there was a lot of crying that night. I stayed very strong that night. But it was very emotional, and it's hard because it's not just me that has the cancer. It's the whole family, right? Is how I look at it. And friends and family, anyone around me in my circle, we're all doing it together. So it was a tough night, and it was bad news because it was 4 different pretty significant spots in my liver. Had more testing done, and had my CT scan. The good news is, after my CT scan, it's not in my lymph nodes, it's nowhere else. It's just in my colon and it's in my liver. We're good. So we started on a very aggressive chemo immediately.
Hey, 3 days after chemo. Been a rough ride. It's definitely, you read all the words and you try to expect the unexpected, but the nausea was completely intense.
Man, chemo was a eye-opening experience. I tell people when they ask me what did the symptoms feel like, they feel like the worst ever adult hangover and the worst flu for 4 to 5 days. I can't eat. I can drink water, which is great, but I can't eat. I've learned that eating during chemo makes me even more sick. So I just choose to kind of fast for those 3 days, until on the 4th day I resume eating. But that's my personal journey, right?
I made it through 3 days of chemo, and finally getting a little bit of my appetite back, and able to keep down some water and keep down some food, which is great. I this time around chose not to eat or drink really much anything, just because it was so painful. But I'm past that. I'm doing well.
With the chemo, and I know that the chemo is shrinking the cancer cells, but it's also it's immediately changed my body. Some of the side effects that I'm getting that are something that it's weird. I call it a superpower. I can smell and break down scent like you wouldn't believe. I can tell you if somebody brings me a peanut butter on bread, I I can smell the peanut butter. I can smell the grains. I can smell the wheat. It is to the point where it's nauseating. And the only thing that I'm finding helps is actual pure peppermint oil. And just having that in one spray. We actually learned if we spray it underneath our kitchen table onto the rug that we have underneath there, it kind of goes throughout the house and it soothes everything. And it makes me feel very selfish to having this issue because no one can cook in my house. The other fun one, I get hiccups for about 3 days. 3 days. They did start prescribing me a muscle relaxer to relax the muscles that are in there. It works great because it also makes me fall asleep. So a double win for me. The more you can sleep, the better when you're going through the chemo. Everybody's been so great, and the doctor and the medical team have been amazing when you're getting the chemo, but it's just like there's no words to describe it. And the underlying tone thing that I find absolutely funny is that it affects everybody differently. And that's the answer. And unfortunately, it's a blatant answer, right? Because you, the patient, going through it the first time, you want to know, like, what am I going to feel? Am I going to get this temperature? Am I going to get, the whole night I have to sit on the toilet? Or is it going to be like what I see in the movies? What is it? And they just say it's going to affect everyone differently. And when I first started hearing that, I was getting very annoyed because every nurse, every doctor, everybody's like, it's going to affect you differently. You may or may not have the symptom. And then when you get the encyclopedia of symptoms, you go mad when you start to read it. You're just like, okay, that's bad. This is worse. And so I chose not to read it. I actually did this. So I always know what I'm on. We put this together, and that way I don't have to see the side effects, because right under this, it shows 2 pages of side effects on each one. So good, right? So we were like, let's just make a visual, because I always forget exactly which chemo's on, because these are all $20 words to me. I'm like, I can't pronounce that. Another symptom that I have is I've learned. So after you have chemo for 48 hours, what's the first thing you want to do? Take a shower, right? So I stood in the shower for, let's call it 30 minutes. I didn't want to leave because I just felt like a different person at this point. And I'm like, just wash all of this off of me. I came out of the shower. I immediately got a fever. Not high enough to have to go to the hospital. And that's the other scary thing, is that they send you home with this paperwork and it says, if you get a fever of 101.4, you must be admitted to the emergency room within minutes. And I'm like, wow, that's aggressive. That's an aggressive statement. So when you're at 101, or I'm sorry, I was at 100.1 when I got out of the shower. I was like, oh my gosh, we got to get ready. We're going to have to go to the hospital. Luckily, my temperature came down, but it was then me just laying against the bed, and I felt horrible, and I was like, what is going on? I can't believe this. So yesterday I spoke with the oncologist nurse, and she was like, we have heard that certain times, like if people are taking too long of showers, it can affect them, especially if they're hot showers. And I'm like, okay, noted. So now I take lukewarm showers and no problems. But it's all every day you're learning something new. Another one of the side effects is that I get what's called a chemo crash, or like a toxic crash. When I get my chemo, I get one for an hour and 20 minutes, then two different chemos for 2 hours and 20 minutes. And then, so then that's 3. And then when they go to do the 4th chemo, it's a pump that I take home. In between the second and the 3rd chemo and the 4th is when my body starts to react, and my temperature goes up, my blood pressure goes through the roof. They have to call in a doctor. It's now happened twice. They have to call in the main doctor that's overseeing the chemo ward for the day. And then they just basically have to get me laying flat, calm me down. They switch me out and put on an IV, just liquids. And so again, this happened to me twice, so I have a feeling this is going to be a pattern. And then they wait about 20 minutes, and it's weird. I snap back like this. Like I come up and I sit up out of the bed, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm ready to go home. It's a very interesting feeling, and it came on just as fast as the first time. Because I was like, oh, I remember it from the first time. Hopefully it doesn't happen. And it literally happened the exact same time. She unhooked the chemo. I sat up and I was like, oh, here it comes. And at least I was able to warn her. And I was like, I'm about to crash. And then I was out. And, then the beep, 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 and all that stuff is going on because my blood pressure went through the roof. But this attending doctor actually gave me some advice. He was like, what has happened is that we've loaded your body full of one toxin and a lot of volume. And your heart is trying to figure out what to do with all this volume. So I'm going to say that this is going to be consistent with you every time you go from this much volume down to a smaller amount of volume. Advice that I can give anyone: be your own advocate. Do not be shy. You are going through cancer, right? You are going through chemo. If you're not going through chemo, you're going through radiation or some sort of treatment. Like, you've got to ask questions, and I don't wait. If it happens, I'm lucky enough that my medical team is part of my chart. So like, I have direct access always. I also have the phone number of my doctor's assistant, where I'm able to call him and speak to him and say, this is going on. And he can let me know if it needs to go to a nurse, or if the question needs to go to insurance and billing, or if the question needs to actually go to the doctor. I have asked every question possible. I don't think that there's any way to get through this unless you're your own advocate. If you stay quiet, and if you're a shy person, which a lot of people are, and some people can be very confused and scared to even open their mouth because, hey, they just found out they have cancer. You've got to find that inner strength, and you've got to be able to advocate for yourself when it comes to insurance, and when it comes to this insurance and finding out your medical path, because you are going to be on so many medications that you don't know what is right and what is wrong. And each medication is going to have its side effect. I'm not just talking about the chemo. I'm talking about all the anti-nausea medicine, the muscle relaxers, the sleep medication, everything's going to have a side effect, and you've got to be able to ask these questions. The biggest thing that we're hoping for is that this really attacks the cells in my liver, so I don't have to have liver surgery, because it's a separate surgeon, separate. It wouldn't be a separate surgery. It would just be two surgeons working at the same time. They would put my body through one stress instead of two separate stress. So I think that we just need to kind of wait and see. I have 2 chemos down. I have 3 to go. Again, I'm going to circle back to advocate for yourself. Prevention is key. As I said earlier, I'm sitting in a waiting room with 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds. Sunday, when I was getting my chemo taken out, the guy that was sitting next to me, he couldn't be more than 24, 25 years old. It's here. It's around. The nurses, the doctors are saying they are seeing cancer. I will tell you this in my final words. My doctor said to me that he is seeing cancer like the flu. Like, if that's any indication that we have a problem in the United States with cancer, and more people need to hear the messages and at least just get screened, what's 2 days of your life to be able to have a life, right? To be able to go get screened. Or if you want to go to one of these new doctor's offices that are doing these PET scans and blood work, like, just go. It's worth it.